Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Planning Committee, which is being held remotely. We're recording the meeting, and the recording will be available on the Council's website following the meeting. The meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel, and the link is being provided on the Council's website. Please note that any comments posted in the chat feed of the Council's YouTube channel during the recording of the meeting will not be monitored by the Council. All mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so that the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Please switch your profile to mute unless you are speaking during the meeting. The procedure for each item is that the planning officer will present their report and committee members will then ask any points of technical clarification. The planning officer will then read out any written statements received from members of the public on a particular item, and the meeting will then be adjourned to enable those who have given notice that they wish to address the committee on a particular application that they wish to do so, of which we have members of the public that have indicated they wish to speak in relation to items number 4 and 5. Each person will be invited to join the meeting via Zoom and will have 3 minutes to give their views. Once all comments have been given, the meeting will be reconvened for members of the committee to discuss their application and reach a decision. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence.
We have received apologies for absence from Parish Councillor Macpherson Davies, and we have 2 substitutions today. Councillor Allen and Councillor Datt are substituted for Councillor Carol Morris and Councillor Turner. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, any declarations of interest?
Yes.
Councillor Datt.
On item 7, planning appeals and enforcement update, there's an item on there for 127 High Street, Billericay, and my firm is instructed in relation to that appeal, but I don't believe we'll be discussing it. And in relation to item 4, to clarify, I believe that that's local authority land. But if it isn't, then I'll say I don't need to declare. But if it is our land, then I declare that that's our land, and I'm a councillor of the local authority.
Thank you, Kemi. If that is to be the case, and I assume that that declaration of interest will apply to all councillors. Sorry, Kemi, you're on mute there.
Yes, we needed to be clear what type of interest all councillors are declaring on that item, please.
Well, if it's local authority and we're local authority councillors, that's of a judicial interest. So I'm just declaring that that's local authority land because in the application on the agenda doesn't make it clear. So I just want to make sure members of the public are watching. If it's our land or Sempra Homes land, that we are in effect the landowner as the council, and we're determining application that the council has applied for.
Okay.
Mr. Spears, could you clarify, please?
Thank you.
Mr. Gill, sorry.
Yeah, it's item 4 is a council land. The application is by the housing service.
Thank you. And in line with comments, I'll assume that that declaration of interest applies for all councillors. Any further declarations of interest? Okay, agenda item number 3, confirmation of the minutes from the previous planning committee held on the 18th of August. Councillor Rimmer.
Yeah, sorry, both myself and Councillor Brown's taken a hand down, but I virtually, but I had my virtual hand up. It was just to say that I don't think it's an interest, but it may be interest to the viewers or members of the public. I am the ward councillor for item number 4 for Pitsea South East.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Agenda item number 3, the confirmation of the minutes.
Councillor Brown has put her hand up virtually as well.
Yeah. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, just to say that I've actually been lobbied from item agenda 6.
Thank you. I see no further hands up. Councillor Rimmer, I still see your hand up on the screen.
Yeah, I'm just going to lower it now.
Okay, we will go on to the minutes from the previous meeting. Councillor Fellows.
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer.
Agreed.
Councillor Brown.
Agreed.
Councillor Kettle.
Agreed.
Councillor Datt.
Abstention.
Councillor Allen. Sorry, Councillor Allen, you're on mute.
Abstention.
And I also am in favour of the minutes. So with 5 votes in favour and 2 abstentions, the minutes have passed. We now go on to agenda item number 4, planning application number 20/00105/4, land adjacent to Cadogan Terrace in Pitsea, which is on pages 9 to 27 of your agenda. And I'll hand over to Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll see if I can share my screen. Right, where would it be? What one is it? Where's it gone? Show windows. Where's it gone? Oh, not showing up. What's that one? Not showing them up. Not that one. That. Where's it gone? Oh, what's happened there? Oh, there. Found it. Hey. All right. Okay. Hopefully we can get through this now. Right. How do we go up and down here? Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. So the application relates to garages to the rear of Cardigan Terrace in Pitsea. The site is a irregular shaped site at the eastern end of Kenneth Road, west of Crown Avenue, and is bounded to the east by terraced housing in Cobden Walk, pedestrian walkway, further terraced houses to the north in Kenneth Road, and terraced houses in Cardigan Terrace itself. The site contains 19 garages in 2 blocks, as you can see on the plan there. The remaining area is like hard standing, used as a parking area. Just a few photos of the area. This is if you're coming up Kenneth Road, the site's roughly in this area here. And you've got the view from the north looking down the site, and from Crown Avenue. You see as typical terrace houses around the site are built, I think, in the late 60s, early 70s. As you go into the site, you've got the larger block of garages, large areas of hard surfacing, as you can see, with the houses either side, east and west, and a small area of open space to the south. And that's if you're looking to the west. So the proposal seeks to demolish all the garages and take up most of the hard surfaced areas, and in its place erect 5 houses, this small terrace of 3 houses fronting Kenneth Road, with parking to the front of those properties with an access onto Kenneth Road itself. They'll be slightly staggered behind the adjoining properties. And on the southern part of the site, you've got a pair of semi-detached properties. They will have their actual garden areas to the side of the properties themselves. These units will have parking directly to the north of the units, and then the remainder of the site will be reconfigured to provide 14 spaces for residents and any visitors, with a new access serving the parking area onto Crown Avenue in this location. The proposal also seeks to remove highway rights over parts of the site, stopping up, as its legal term is, the areas of the areas hatched in red here, and then there'll be some small areas that will be adopted as part of the scheme to offset those areas lost. So the dwellings themselves are similar to a number of social rented housing schemes we've approved recently. 2-storey terraced houses with gable fronted, buff brickwork with some brick detailing, either raised or kind of panel effect, with a concrete roof tiles. Excuse me. To the front of the properties, you have a small brick wall. I'd say they're quite typical of the schemes we've recently approved. Internally, they'll have the living room, kitchen, diner on the ground floor with 2 beds at the upper levels. And the 2 properties at the southern part of the site, again, very similar. The only slight difference is on the side elevations. You've got the main living room windows on the sides of the property, but on the rear you have at first floor you have the bedroom windows to the front and rear. This is to ensure there's no direct overlooking of the neighbouring properties to the east or west of the site. This is just a kind of CGI of what it could look like from Kenneth Road. You can see the kind of buff brickwork, block paving to the parking areas to the front, some small areas of landscaping. And then there's a slightly wider view of the scheme as a whole. So the properties in Kenneth Road on the left-hand side of the screen, with those set at the back of the southern part of the site on the right-hand there, and there'll be some improvements within the parking area. This is slightly been modified since this was drawn up. The actual landscaped area will be on the west side of the parking area due to some highway changes within that area. So if we go to the kind of principles of the scheme, say it's in a residential area where schemes like this in principle could be accepted subject to impacts on a highway, neighbours and kind of visual issues. The excuse me, in terms of the visual impact, as you see from the slides that are shown, it's felt that it would be a visual improvement. You have the properties on the northern part of the site enclosing that Kenneth Road frontage, giving a more traditional appearance to the street itself, whilst those two properties to the southern part of the site will enable a greater surveillance of the parking area and maybe making it more secure and less issues with crime should there be any instances in that area. There'll be improvements in terms of the additional landscape within that area, and say overall it's felt that it would visually improve the area. In terms of impact on neighbours, the 3 properties to the northern part of the site have been designed to ensure that there's no side windows that may overlook the neighbours' rear gardens. It's ensured that it doesn't set back too far to block out light, and is adequate distance from the properties to the south. Whilst the southern pair of properties, as I mentioned earlier, have been designed to ensure that there's no main windows at first floor level, which will look over the adjoining rear gardens of properties in Cobden Walk or Cardingham Terrace. Sufficient garden areas are provided for all of the units, which will be similar to those found within the area, and as well as adequate car parking for each of the units. In terms of neighbour comments, as I say, they've raised a number of issues relating to in predominantly traffic issues, lack of that the proposal could lead to insufficient car parking in the surrounding area, that when football games are carried out in the Bowes United Football Club close to the site, that has a knock-on effect, and this site is sometimes used as an overspill car park. Issues regarding impact on neighbours directly, as well as during the construction phase. We've also received a petition from residents containing 31 signatures, and the main issue there was to do with the loss of parking within the site. We also received 1 letter of support. In terms of the parking, which seems to be the main issue for residents, is the site, as I mentioned earlier, has a number of garages, 19 in total, which 7 have been in use as at present, as well as around 18 parking spaces within that area as a whole. The proposal could displace vehicles into the surrounding road network. As part of the scheme, the applicants have provided a parking survey, and this has shown that on the nights the survey was carried out, around 50% of the 143 spaces within the survey area were available for use should anybody be displaced from the site. In terms of the garage occupation, there are vacancies within the garage areas in Clarendon Road, which is the north site, and in Manor Road to the west. So if anybody wishes to rent a garage, there are opportunities in those locations. as it's felt that there is sufficient spaces available within the site have been shown by the survey work carried out by the applicants. The provision of 14 spaces on the site for residents is felt to be adequate and reasonable and sufficient in this case. And as I had mentioned before, a number of residents have raised issues about the impact of the parking during football games. These instances are isolated and occur maybe once or twice a week at the most. And it's not considered an objection could be raised on those grounds. In terms of impact on the highway network, so it's only 5 additional units, and the Highway Authority have not raised any issues in that respect. The Highway Authority are also happy with the layout as it's now proposed. They initially had some issues with the turning area within the site, and revisions have been made to ensure that those requirements have been met. So overall, it's felt that the proposal will make good use of this urban site, providing 5 social rented properties, together with the re-provision on the site of 14 car parking spaces for residents and visitors. It's been designed to ensure no direct detrimental impact on neighbouring properties, and is therefore recommended to the committee for approval, subject to conditions as set out at the end of the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Can't hear you, Jack.
Apologies. So we'll now go into technical questions for clarification. If you do have any technical questions for clarification, if you could use the hand raising tool on the screen, and I will call members as I see their hand raised. And I have Councillor Dadds, first of all.
Thank you. Could I just, through you, Mr. Chairman, just check how we've got 19 car garages. I think on the hard standing, did I hear it right that there's 18 available spaces normally? And I'd like clarification on the stopping up or the new access from Crown Avenue. How many car spaces will be lost regarding the area leading up to the junction? Because obviously it has to have the space either side. So how many spaces are lost there? So I want to understand the current use and availability in its totality. That's my question.
Thank you, Councillor Dadds. Mr. Gill?
Yeah, so I mentioned 19 garages with 7 use at the moment, around about 18 spaces on the site. And as regards the access, it's probably, I'd say, 2 or 3 spaces that would be lost. So you've got, say, 21 spaces plus
40.
7. Well, yeah, 19 garages, but only 7 are actually in use.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer.
Yeah, so I was just going to ask, really, you've said about the football and the situation, and we haven't done a proper impact of the football and the parking issue. I personally feel that once or twice a week is quite a lot to put on residents in terms of impact. If you're somebody who lives in there and is dependent on your car, you might be an elderly person who has trouble actually taking their shopping from their car to their property, or other work items, whatever. And maybe the closer you can park to your property, the better. And if you're actually being pushed further and further away from your property, because we're actually denying parking facilities that are normally there, that could potentially have an impact. So I am concerned enough, and I'm wondering how much weight I can give to this issue of the football not being considered in this, because it is, as a ward councillor, it has come up a lot with me when I've walked around there and talked to residents, that in terms of the impact the football can potentially have on parking.
Mr. Gill, I think you mentioned it in your presentation, but do you want to say any more in relation to the weight of the football club?
I'd say I would give it very limited weight because you say it's a bit like a church use. They may be some issues when the church is in operation, but for most of the time you're talking about, probably, well, other than maybe 2 or 3 hours a week, there's parking available for all residents. So it's probably maybe a Saturday morning or a Wednesday evening, depending when the games are. But the rest of the time there are the survey work carried out, there are sufficient spaces to accommodate any shortfall on the site.
Could we ask for some sort of parking management system to be put in place? I mean, this is the council as the landlord. This is something that we could have a look at, surely, because if we're doing this project, why not get some public good out of it as well, and see if there's a need for any sort of TRO on and all sorts of parking permit system in the area for residents, because clearly there's an issue there and we could be adding to it.
Ms. Lyons, do you want to address that point?
Obviously, the impact of the football club is a matter for the football club to deal with in terms of displaced parking. And if I recall, as part of the recent planning application for Bowers Gifford, we did ask for a parking management plan to be created. So I don't think we can use this development as a way to actually sort of circumvent that issue. So we know there's displaced parking with all those type of events, but I don't think that's a matter we can look at in terms of this application. That's a wider consideration for parking within the area, not this application. So I would say that as Dave Gill said, the officer, I agree that it's got limited, if nil, weight in terms of this application.
Thank you for the reminder on the parking management plan of the Bowers Gifford Football Club. Is it possible to circulate that to members so we can actually have a look at that and see what the progress was on that? Obviously, this won't affect my decision. That's just another ask based on the information you've just given me. I can't hear you, Jack. Sorry.
Sorry, I'll take myself off mute. I'll follow up with Ms. Lyons and officers up following this meeting in relation to that specific question. Councillor Allen, Councillor Dowden, Councillor Rimmer, I still have your hands up on my screen. If you have finished asking your questions, if you could take them down. But Councillor Allen.
Yes, on the elevation of the properties on Kenneth Road, you spoke of a wall being sort of a metre-high wall along the front of the properties, but the parking is in front of those properties. I wondered how the wall in front of the properties and the car parking were interrelated.
I'll see if I can get the drawing up again. Yeah, can you see that? Yeah, there's a wall along.
You're not sharing the screen at the moment.
Oh, I'm not sharing it. Hang on a sec. It's disappeared on here. Hang on. Oh, there. Share the screen again. Where is it gone? Any problems finding it? No, it's not. No. What's happening there? Can you see it or not? No.
Not at the moment, Mr. Gill.
Oh, I found it. There it is. There. Oh, no, it's not showing it, is it?
You're showing us, we can see your folder.
Yeah, I can see the print here, but it's not coming up. Let's try it again. I don't know what's happening here.
You might need to stop sharing and then reshare your screen.
Yeah, I'll have to. How do you stop sharing? That's the thing on here. Let's try a new thing. Let's do a new. Yeah, try that. Yeah, can you see now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So great. Yeah, you can see the pre-units here. The low wall is around that area there. Can you see the hand? You've got the parking coming off Kenneth Road, and then there's a paved area between the houses with a small low wall directly in front of the dwellings themselves.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't see the point of having a low wall right up to the front of the properties. You might just have the parking and the properties. I can't see the point of having a low wall like that.
I think it just gives them a bit of defensible space, so then people don't come right up to their windows, because it still will be quite open at the front here.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, do you have any further questions?
Well, that area that you've spoken where the low wall is, that's not the public pavement, is it?
I think it also creates a space to put the wheelie bins, everything, and the rubbish tucked behind, so it doesn't sit within the street scene.
You've explained it to me, and I'll accept that.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I see no further hands raised. So we will now go out of session, and we have 3 members of the public wishing to address the committee this evening. So I'd like to invite Michael Co-Smith, first of all. Mr. Gill, if I could just ask you to stop sharing the screen as well. Welcome to the meeting, Mr. Co-Smith. You'll have 3 minutes to address the committee.
He's still joining. His audio isn't connected yet. I think he has.
I think we're experiencing some issues connecting to audio here.
Hi.
Mr. Co-Smith, you're now in the Zoom meeting. Could you?
Okay.
So, Mr. Co-Smith, you'll have 3 minutes to address the committee. My colleague, Julie from Democratic Services, timer on the screen. So your 3 minutes will be timed by Julie, and it will give you a 30-second warning notice before the end of your time. So your 3 minutes will start now.
Hi, good evening. I am Mr. Co-Smith. I live at 7 Cadogan Terrace. I've lived here for 21 years, and obviously the impact of this, the houses in the southern region will impact my house more than anyone else's. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah? Sorry. Mike. 1 sec. Tracy, butt out. I'm on there. Right. Obviously, the first impact I'm having on is going to be the losing of light and sunshine. It's going to be very close to my property. You're talking about a metre away before the other property starts. You're creating a security problem, but it's not there at the moment. My privacy is going to be threatened or impeded. And also the access to back the deliveries of larger furniture, items, things like that, if they can't get through the front. The parking is definitely be a problem. I could show you what it's going to be like. I'll show that at the back of my door now if I move my computer around.
Mr. Co-Smith, we're not allowed to accept any additional evidence at this stage.
Right, okay. Right, well, at the moment, outside my house, the back there, I've got a lovely vista of all the skies, slight rooftops, but the house that's going to be put there is obviously going to be a complete blank brick wall. And that's why I'm going to be looking out at my patio doors every day now, once the moment starts. It's literally a metre away from my back gate to their back gate. It's going to start. It's very close. We haven't got that problem at the moment. The security problem, at the moment, it's quite open at the back there, very relaxed. Other neighbours can look on my back of my property. The one's trying to break in. There'll be now. You're talking about creating an alleyway which has already been advised to other neighbours that they're losing the alleyway, but now they're creating one on my property. And so I'm worried about that. Is obviously people can hide there. I know there's been mentions of gates, but also that causes more problems. Trying to get in and out and rubbish, the green bins. You're looking at going through two gates, what they're talking about, and my own gate as well. Now, do I need it? Privacy, yes, but the people are going to be that close. Jumping over their fence, looking up into mine, we haven't got that problem at the moment. Access to the back, same thing. That means we have to make sure it will be able to get settees in there, or fish freezers, beds even, because going through two gates. And the parking, you've already mentioned it. Someone turned around and said 19 garages, 7 being used, 18 spaces out there. You're only giving 14. So now straight away you're looking at 27 parking spaces. But you're telling us we've got to go elsewhere. But the houses you're building, you're giving them 2 spaces each. How can that be fair?
Okay,
you're telling me I've got to go and park half a mile away.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Smith. Your time is up. Thank you for addressing the committee this evening. We do have another member of the public that wishes to address us this evening, and that's Cecilia Christou.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite Cecilia Christou to address the committee, who I think is just connecting at the moment.
Hello.
Hi, Cecilia. Thank you for joining the meeting this evening. You will have 3 minutes to address the committee this evening, and my colleague Julie from Democratic Services will have a timer that will appear on screen. At 2 minutes 30, I will give you notice that you have 30 seconds left to address the committee. So your 3 minutes will start from now.
Okay. Hello, good evening. I'm Cecilia Christou, and I'm at number 9 Cadogan Terrace. Earlier, one of your colleagues did mention that Bowers Club only have 2 events. Bowers Club have about 12 events that go on in a week. And yesterday, for example, was a day maybe we should have taken photos. The parking was unbelievable. So I don't know when the survey was done, that we don't know, but on a night, every night is busy. We finish work at 5:30. We get home around 5:30, and we hardly get any parking in front of our houses. Anywhere on the street, forget in front of the house. Anywhere on the street, you don't get parking. So if you guys are gonna build these houses here and you're giving everyone 2 parking spaces because you think they're entitled to it, then I think we deserve something. We deserve a parking permit or parking spaces for us to park our cars as well. Because I've got 2 young children. If I go and shop for them, I do anything for them. Where am I parking the car to let the shopping out? If they have activities, you dare not move your car because you come back to find no parking space in front of the house. Anywhere on the street. And this is from 5:30 onwards. And Bowers Club, maybe we can get their timetable. They have about 12 events on a weekly basis, not 2. 12 teams they have there. So it's a busy night, full on night every night. So we do need to address the parking situation because it's a very serious situation around here.
Thank you, Cecilia. You do have another minute if you wish to carry on addressing the committee.
Yeah, well, I want the issue of the parking to be looked into again because it's not going to help us in any way at all. So a parking permit would be very, very helpful if we could look into a parking permit because all these houses, 5 houses, are getting 2 parking spaces each and we're getting nothing. We're going to suffer to have spaces. And at the end of Cadogan Kenneth Road, the 3 houses there, we're going to lose 4 or 5 parking spaces, not 3 as one of your colleagues says. It's going to be about 4 or 5 parking spaces being lost there. So where are those cars going to be parking? Those cars will have nowhere else to park. Adjacent roads, if you go there, one evening, I can send pictures to you guys. If I'm allowed to do that, I'll go around there and I'll take photos. Neighboring roads have no parking either. So I don't know when the survey was taken, but it's a very busy area. Now, parking is a problem. And it always will be a problem. And this will only add to the problem that we have.
Thank you, Cecilia. I would now like to invite Chris Christou to address the committee, who will also have 3 minutes.
Okay.
Hello.
Chris, thank you for addressing the committee this evening. You'll have 3 minutes to address us, and my colleague Julie from Democratic Services will have a phone on screen counting down the time from 3 minutes. I will give you a reminder at 30 seconds, 2 minutes 30, that you have 30 seconds left. Okay.
Thank you.
Your time will start now.
Hello, my name is Chris Christou. I live at 9 Cadogan Terrace and have lived there since 2003. I want to reiterate how important it is regarding parking. Not only are we losing spaces as said, but I think it's been trivialized how the football club is going to affect us. I know my wife said that there's 12 football teams. Since last week, tonight is the first night that I've come home and I've parked outside my house. I sometimes try around the back, it can't happen. I sometimes try around the front, it can't happen. And I'm waiting. I went out yesterday while there was training on. Had to go out in the evening to go and get some shopping. I came back and I couldn't park and had to go around the back. It's not really an acceptable level or level of thought that has gone into it. I'm not sure when the stress test was done for the parking, but clearly it was done at a time that doesn't really represent what goes on around here. On top of that, when it gets busy, it gets congested around here. So I have waited in the past. I have waited in order to get down my road in order to park, because the amount of cars are going in and out at the same time. Not cars coming in one way, going in and then waiting 2 hours. Cars are both going in and coming out. It's like this whenever there's a major event. And yesterday, as an example, because it's fresh in my mind, the amount of foot traffic and that from people coming that have gone around and found parking, it's not doing us any favors. Secondly, I just want to point out that looking at the plan, my house is number 9 Cadogan Terrace, the first house along that has the longer garden, and it looks like that the border is going to go right up to my fence, but my gate is on that fence, and that's the access that I have to my rear garden. I'm hoping that's not the case, that it gets approved and I can't even access up the rear, but that's something I noticed on the plan tonight. I might be wrong, but that's how it looked to me. So if you can take these into account, you already have a petition with 30 odd signatures, and that's all the houses that are probably just on this road that is affected, but it's not ideal for anybody. And just quickly going back to the congestion, it's not safe. If fire engines or ambulance need to get down, they're not doing it. If I can't get down my road, then when there's a problem, when there's a day like that, no emergency services are getting down that road either. And there are a few older people on this road that it could affect. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Christou. That is your time that is up. We will now go into the main session. I would like to thank all members of the public for addressing committee this evening. We'll now go into the main session. I do have indication from Councillor Rimmer.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. What the residents have just said has sort of echoed my concerns and my experience as a ward councillor as well, in respect of the parking. I do have serious questions about when this parking survey was actually carried out and how it was carried out. And I don't think we can actually make an informed decision tonight based on the survey, because clearly it is more than just 2 events that are happening per week. And clearly taking out parking spaces is going to have an effect on the level of off-road parking that is available to the existing residents, and it seems to be completely unfair. Now, there was a point raised tonight by the members of the public, which I hadn't even considered, but gives me grave concerns. The first speaker talked about an alleyway being created, and we know that the potential for crime creation that some of this design has had in the past. And I want to be risk assured for this isn't going to be happening with this particular design, that we are just creating an area that could be used potentially for drug use or other criminal activity. I am concerned about what the last resident stated as well, in respect of the access to his rear garden and whether that has actually been truly considered. There's too many concerns here for me, and I don't think the parking survey in particular is one that will be resolved tonight in terms of answers from officers. I think we're going to have to ask for another parking survey, one that actually looks at periods of time that are likely to be busy as well as quiet, because it doesn't feel to me to be a true reflection of the situation on the ground. If we can't defer, I'd probably have to oppose this planning application.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. You've covered a number of issues there. And firstly, I'd like to thank the residents for coming forward and expressing those issues. And they've done that tonight and also throughout the application here. I think there's a number of questions for officers. And I don't believe we're in a position to have the information that we need this evening to make a full decision in relation to the parking. So I would like to put a proposal to defer this application.
We save all matters.
But could I speak, Mr. Chairman, on a point though?
Could I second your motion to defer first? Sorry, Councillor Dadds.
So I do propose that we defer the application, and I will invite you to speak afterwards, Councillor Dadds, on all matters to allow us to come back to the committee with a full report and in relation to the other points that residents have made. Councillor Dadds, Ms. Lyons, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, there's one issue I think we didn't cover in the report, which I think that I would request that we actually further address, and that the relationships of the alleyways and the issues that the resident raised in terms of the impact of the alleyways. I think that wasn't raised in the report, and I think that probably is a point that we may need to look further at. And also a review of the parking stress surveys and also the impact of additional parking. So I think we should defer it for all matters, and also include into that a review of the creation of the new alleyways and how that will impact potential crime prevention, and how we've looked at those in terms of crime prevention.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. Councillor Dadds.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, a couple of points have been raised, so it's deferred. It would be worth mentioning now so that officers will know that some of these comments may be coming back. We need to establish for sure how many car parking spaces in Crown Avenue would be lost. Officers are saying 2 to 3, but we heard from Celia that believes it's 4 to 5. In addition to that, we've calculated already 19 garages, 18 open spaces, maybe 4 to 5 in Crown Avenue. That's 42. But even if I deduct the 12 garages that are not occupied, that would leave 30 spaces. So this current scheme only offers 14. So it's a 50% reduction. That's why I think it is important to understand the methodology behind the parking survey, because when we looked at the photographs given by the officer at first instance, they were during the day and in January of this year, the 30th of January 2020. And I counted on the photographs 10 vehicles during the day. So therefore, when we talk about Mr. husband, they said you dare not move your car at 5:30 in the evening. So I would clearly want to know, and I'm sure we would all want to know, what the day and time, and what is the viability in relation to parking at 5:30 in the early evening, and whether the loss of the 15 or 16 spaces, what effect that would have on the amenity for the local area and the displacement that will cause. Because we've heard front and back of the house and neighbouring streets, you can't park if you leave your house at 5:30 or return a bit later. So I'm concerned about the methodology and the validity around that survey. So I just wanted to make those observations because I may not come back next time as I'm a substitute. And I've made those notes. I hope you didn't mind me making those comments.
That's fine. That's fine, Councillor Dowds. We'll take that into account. I see Mr. Gillsby merrily writing that down as well, so we'll deal with those points.
Thank you, Councillor Dowds. I see no further members wishing to speak on this item, so I have formally moved to defer, which has been on all matters, which has been seconded by Councillor Rimmer. So we'll now go to the vote on the deferral. I'll be voting in favour. Councillor Fellows?
In favour, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Kettle?
In favour, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Dowds?
In favour.
Councillor Brown?
In favour.
Councillor Allen?
In favour.
Councillor Rimmer?
In favour.
So with 7 in favour, that has been moved. That has been deferred on all matters this evening. We now go on to agenda item number 5, planning application number 20/00683/4 at 11 Wesley Road, Langdon Hills, which is on pages 29 to 43 of your agenda. And I'll hand over to Mr. Gill again for this application.
Okay, you have to bear with me trying to share my screen again. Right, here we come. Doing it again. Let's see. Let's stop sharing. Reshare. Where does it go? Lost it again. Yeah, sorry about this. Where is it gone? It's disappeared completely. Any problems? Where's it gone? Where is it gone? Ah, found it. It's all right. Hey, found it at last. Right, sorry about that. Yeah, so the application relates to site 11 Westerly Road, Langdon Hills, and the site is located on north side Westerly Road, about 100 metres from its junction with the High Road, near what used to be called the Crown Pub. The site is set within a number of properties and mixed character. Generally quite spacious plots, ranging from roughly 11 metres in here, ranging to around 20, I think it's 23 if I remember rightly, on the adjoining sites. So they're relatively spacious. This is the application site itself. It's a late 1960s property with a large detached garage to its east side. The site, oh, sorry about it. The site is on a slightly sloping ground. This is the building itself. This is a neighbouring property. It's a kind of side gabled, similar period sort of property with their driveway and the garage to the side. If you look from the to the east of the site, you've got a detached. Again, I think it's 1960s, that sort of period, detached chalet. That property has a number of side windows facing the site. This is a view from within the site, looking back on the dwelling itself. The existing dwelling does have some combination in the roof at the rear as well. So this is number number 17 to the east here. Say there are some windows to the side there. Number 9 there with their garage within the garden, and as you can probably just see, there's the land does fall to the west. The proposal is to demolish all the buildings on the site and erect 2 detached houses. They have a basement level to both properties with roof accommodation. So the properties themselves will be set back roughly following the building line of the dwellings either side. Parking to the front with a small planted area adjacent. The property is set with a gap of roughly 2 metres between the new properties, and set a metre off the boundary from the main dwellings itself. The garage on the western plot will abut the boundary with number 9. The the layout. Oh, doing it now. What's happened here? What's happened there? I don't know. Oh. Aha, so it's come back again. All right. Yeah. So the design would be kind of quite traditional, red brick walls, kind of hanging tile and rendered gable features, and a slightly crown roof, but overall height about 8.4 meters. I think that's the what I've got on here, 8.45 meters. The rear element would have a kind of single first floor projection within the center of the site, and a dormer within the roof space. Kind of layout, you've got the basement area with a entertainment room, as they're calling it. You kind of stand out the kind of living area, kitchen, diner, sort of reception area there, and then 4 bedrooms over 2 floors. The roof accommodation would have a dressing room as well. The house on plot 2 are nearly identical, but they have the first floor projection on the central or the west hand side of the rear elevation to keep it away from the property at number 17. So this is a kind of street scene showing the kind of different ground levels, as you can see. So the properties will rise to the east, shows the outline of the existing property, and they're been revised to ensure that they are no higher than the existing building. With properties, it will infill the site slightly more than what's there, but it still retains a gaps between the adjoining properties and the two properties proposed on the site itself. So if you go to the kind of principal, as I say, the site itself is in an urban area. The surrounding streets are relatively spacious properties, and as I mentioned before, minimum width is around about 11 meters. The proposal itself will be roughly 11.8, I think, is on the western plot, and 11.5 on the eastern plot. So it's in keeping with those in the area. The depth of the properties will ensure that particularly the first floor level meets the relevant 45-degree lines, ensuring no loss of light to neighbouring properties. The design, as you can see, is we feel is in keeping with the surrounding area. It's got traditional and similar features to the excuse me.
Sorry, I missed that sentence. It was garbled.
I can't remember. As I say, neighbours have made issues regarding
Mr. Chairman,
the construction, the basement level.
Sorry, Mr. Gill. I think there was
we need to go back slightly. Need to go back slightly because it froze.
So I think it froze for different people at different points. If you could,
was it this slide?
It was on this slide.
It was, yeah.
But it was probably about 2 or 3 sentences back.
Yeah, but it's on slide, right? Yeah. So the design, the site of the plot widths, so the plot widths are 11.8 and 11.5, which will be similar to that found at number what's it number? I can't remember property number. I think it's 21. Sorry. So it's felt that won't look out of character or cramped in the street itself. There's a good separation between the buildings and the adjoining properties. In terms of the depth of the properties, they would be will ensure that they meet the relevant 45-degree code in terms of loss of light or potential loss of light to neighbouring properties. I think you can just see on this drawing they've shown that the light still be possible to the side window of number 17. In terms of the impact here, we've got quite a good good distance away from that property. There's no main windows in the side elevation of that dwelling there. The overall form is in keeping, we feel, with the number of properties found in Wesley Road, quite substantial 4 or 5 bed properties surrounding the area itself. In terms of the distances to the properties to the rear, there's at least 26 metres from the rear of the proposed dwellings and the properties in Lee Chapel South, again well in excess of what we would normally see on the sites of this type. And in terms of the garden areas, they're 12, minimum of 12 metres deep, and over our minimum requirement of 100 square metres for properties this side, and wouldn't look out cramped or out of character with the adjoining properties. In terms of parking, so I've mentioned before, there's 2 parking spaces within the front garden. There's also an integral garage, so that potentially could be used if required, and that would meet the relevant parking standards. And so highways have raised no objections as normal. And I think I've mentioned about the neighbours raising concerns about the actual construction of the property itself in terms of the basement, and those issues are normally dealt with at the building control stage, and not something that we can consider as part of the application itself. So overall, so the applicants have provided a CGI of what it might look like if granted. And so overall, we feel that the proposal makes good use of this urban site, will be in keeping with those found in the surrounding area, provides adequate parking, and we feel is acceptable and recommended to committee subject to the conditions as set out at the end of the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. If you could stop sharing your screen so I can see everybody. And we'll now go into technical questions for clarification, of which I don't see anybody indicating to ask. Councillor Fellows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually drove down the road today so I could be familiar with this application. And there are various house types in that road. But the reason that I drove there was I wanted to feel comfortable that these 2 houses on the plot, where one house currently is not going to impact on the street scene. And I believe that it does. It's impossible to put 2 houses with a greater bulk than the existing property and not impact on street scene. Now, how much value we put on that is up to individual members. But I would just like to challenge that that one part of the officer's report. It's subjective. I've yet to make my mind up how much power I give to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fellows. I think Councillor Rimmer and Allen both came in at the same time. So, Councillor Allen.
Yes, the site plan, they've got the 45-degree splay lines showing that there's a 45-degree splay, but they only do it for the upstairs. They haven't done it for the downstairs. So there's a bit of a crafty use of or omission of certain things, because obviously the 45-degree lines at the back do actually affect the residents at the ground level. So I think that shows a bit of craftiness, really.
Thank you. Councillor Rimmer, if I could just ask members to make sure these technical questions that we're asking in this particular section, please. Councillor Rimmer.
I think it was a technical observation that was to be clarified, so a technical question, I'd say. But I would go, there was something odd with the CGI as well, compared to that diagram with the 45-degree angle. in that the CGI seemed to be showing the houses much further set apart. And I didn't know if that was because there was a tree obscuring part of the house in the CGI, and whether that was, so I needed some clarification on that CGI versus the actual street scene diagram in terms of which one is accurate. I think I know which one is accurate, but I would just like that to be confirmed.
Mr. Gill?
Yeah, so in terms of the CGI, I think that there is a tree. I don't know if I can show it. The tree is actually in front of the. I'll try and show it. Where's it gone again? I have closed it. Yeah. Where's it gone?
I do have another question
No,
after this as well. Sorry.
I'll try and it's still not working. I don't know where it's gone.
Councillor Allen, your hand is still raised. Did you wish to come back in?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's gone. Disappeared. Any idea? Ah, no. Let's say I'll close that one. Let's try it. It's not an. Yeah, I'm afraid it's not. It's back again. Right. Why is it not showing? Oh, yeah. The tree there is actually hiding the dwelling. You can see the dwelling is there. Is that the query, Mr. Councillor Rimmers?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It just seems very conveniently.
That's actually on. Yeah.
It sort of hides the house,
street
doesn't
there.
it?
The tree is around about there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so a couple of questions more. Sorry, on the the trees themselves, are any of them particularly valuable, and are they going to be unharmed?
Well, that tree is on the neighbouring property, so that won't be affected by the scheme. And the site itself, as you probably saw from the photos, they've cleared.
They've cleared everything. Well, they've killed all the trees already.
Yeah.
So on the and the third thing is respect of the basement, basically. I know much of this falls under the remit of actual building control, but in terms of our remit in respect to the basement, do we have anything? Now they're saying they wish to have an entertainment room there. Does it affect anything to do with the planning if it turned into a bedroom, for instance?
Well, the room you can see the room itself hasn't got any windows, so there would be, I think there'd be issues from building control in that respect. So that would.
But we wouldn't consider it in respect to planning.
No.
Just clarifying that. No. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Councillor Brown.
Just a point of clarification really for members here. Can officers just clarify when members obviously have raised concerns about one plot being divided into two. If you look down that road, you can see that different homes are on different size of plots. And that also, when you look at this plot being divided in two, you can see that the next plot next to it, on Wesley Road, has previously also been divided into two in a very similar way. On this plot here, can you just clarify that it meets our minimum requirements in terms of garden space, etc.?
It does, yes.
So therefore, whether or not we think that the plot is too small or not is irrelevant, correct?
No, you can consider whether it's in keeping, but let's say one aspect is to ensure that there are adequate, say, garden areas, garden depths, and that it is in the overall scheme itself is in keeping with the area. But as I mentioned, there are others within the area. There's one to the rear as well.
There are others that have had the plot
that have been subdivided. Yes.
Yes, I mean, like the next door plot. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Rimmer, your hand is still raised. Did you wish to ask another question? I will go to Councillor Dadds first of all, though.
A technical question. I was concerned that there's perhaps been a site visit by one of the councillors, and that opinion has been shared. I'm a bit concerned if we're going along on our own and forming those opinions. Am I allowed to take that opinion into account? Should I discard it, or should there be a site visit? I'm asking the professional officers to give us the elevations, heights, and standards. I'm happy to accept that, but also you've had Councillor Fellows say that he's been and he's forming a different opinion. I'm a bit concerned whether do we do these site visits? Are we allowed to do that? And are we allowed to take those comments into account? If we are, then great. If we're not, then we'll discount those.
Thank you, Councillor Dadds. I will ask Ms Lyons to interject or to come in after I've spoken, but we're making a decision on the basis of the information in front of us from the officer's report and the presentation. Ms Lyons? And
that's correct. And obviously, if a councillor's been on site, that's for their own personal use. We haven't had a formal site visit to this site. And therefore, what you should take into consideration is the report in front of you, which you would have read, and also the presentation that you would have seen from the officer tonight. And also, if you've taken the time to look at the application online you might have looked at as well.
Councillor Dadds, did you have any further technical questions for clarification?
No, I think that answers it. I will disregard the comments regarding the site visit by the councillor and just look at the information that's presented tonight.
Thank you. If you could lower your hand on the screen. Councillor Fellows, I'll come to you after Councillor Allen.
Somewhere in the design and access statement, it says the property has been sited a metre from the boundaries of the property, which is reasonable for the detached houses and to maintain the spaces. But actually, the ground level plots are actually on the boundary, on the garage walls, actually on the boundaries between the property. So there isn't that space, that 1 metre, between the plot boundary and the property. I just wondered if they've stated it is in a design and access statement, but then when they come to you look at the plan, it's not, that doesn't hold up.
Mr. Gill, did you wish to add any further information onto that?
Not I think basically what they're saying is the main dwelling itself, as you see the first floor, is set a metre away. The garages, which are quite common, are set on the boundaries of the property, but the actual main parts of the buildings are set within a metre, or over a metre away from the boundary. I think that's how they mean to phrase it. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Councillor Allen, did you have any further technical questions? Thank you. If you could lower your hand, that'd be great. Councillor Fellows.
Yeah, just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, about visiting the site. I didn't go on the site, but as a member of the planning committee, I often do this to get a street view of what we've been asked to decide on. Whether members listen to what I've just said or they go from the report as presented by the officers is entirely up to them, and if they also wish to do a site visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fellows. The agenda is published. The addresses of where these proposals are out there. So if a member wishes to go and have a site visit, they're able to do that. But it is for members of the planning committee to judge on the basis of the application that we have in front of us. Councillor Rimmer.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just confused by the officer advice on this, because I think we can consider what Councillor Fellows said as evidence if we choose to do so, because he could have come here, some people could come here as a ward councillor and speak to the council and actually say, as a site I have visited, I can tell you in respect to the street scene, da-di-da-di-da-di-da. And that's all the councillor has actually done. I just don't see the difference between what he is doing as a member of the committee and what he would have done if he was a ward member speaking on the subject or a member of the public on this. I just don't see the difference in the level of evidence that's actually been given.
I think the officer advice that we've had on that is quite clear. It's not uncommon, and over the last two and a half years, I've sat on many committees where members have said that they've been to visit. So we've had the advice on that. We do have 4 members that wish to address the committee, and I'd now like to go out of session. Mr. Gill. Mr. Gill, you're on mute.
Is it to the neighbour comments you come into? So I've got one to read out. So.
Okay. So before we go out of session to invite members of the public to address the committee, we do, in light of that, Mr. Gill, if you'd like to read out the neighbour's comment.
Yeah. So in terms of the neighbour, it's the actual applicant. It's a Mr. and Mrs. Beckford. They live across the road. So they've put in a lengthy letter. They say, we are the applicants in regards to the above application. The first point we would like to make is that we intend to live, hopefully as our forever home, in one of the properties outlined to be built in the submitted plans. Therefore, we would not choose to build something that was out of character in regards to the road as a whole and neighbouring properties. And we believe that the CGI street scene showing the proposed dwellings flanked by the 2 neighbours shows this. We have complied with all the suggested changes made by planning officers in order to accommodate any concerns and to help address the relevant objections made by some of our neighbours. I myself, Mr. Beckford, have lived in Westley Road for 30 years in total. My parents live in Westley Road. My brother and his family have only recently moved from Westley Road. My father is a builder, and as well as hopefully building the 2 houses we have submitted plans for, he has built 6 houses in Westley Road, all of an excellent design and build, and having stood the test of time as they range from 30 years old to 5 years old. We simply wouldn't build something out of keeping or too bulky or something that some of the objectors would state as poor design. Our neighbour at number 9 Westley Road and her son, who lives out of the area, are 2 of the 5 objections received. However, she's only recently sold the house and is due to exchange imminently, and will be moving out of the area before our build, should the planning be successful even begins. I'm not entirely sure why she has chosen to object, as the house was put up for sale even before we had submitted our planning application. We have contacted the prospective new neighbours and have shown them the plans. They have no objection whatsoever, and also informed us that they plan to apply for planning permission to extend number 9 Westley Road. Therefore, we believe that any objections outlined by the lady at number 9 and her son should be overlooked. Our other neighbour at number 17 had valid concerns for loss of light, and therefore, at the request of the planning officer, we changed the design of the house to ensure the first floor rear projection does not encroach on the rooms that said of number 17. The other 2 objections are from houses at the rear of the property. They both state they are concerned with being overlooked. While the planning officer stated these properties are in excess of the minimum required distance between neighbouring properties to have this concern, we'd like to ensure them that the top floor of the house to the rear of the property would be a non-habited dressing room, so unlikely that anyone would be frequently looking out over their properties. We'd also like to add that the property that currently sits on the plot has an existing potentially habitable room with a window looking out to the rear across these properties, so nothing would really be changed in these respects. In summary, we would like you to approve our plan application, as we have addressed any changes suggested by the planning officer, and we have complied with any reasonable objections the neighbours have had. We intend for one of these houses to be our forever home, so we wouldn't build something that would look out of place or poorly designed, and believe it would only enhance the plot when compared to how it is in its current state. Kind regards, Mr. and Mrs. Beckford. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. We'll now go out of session, and our first speaker is Martin Davis.
It's just a little bit slow joining.
Sorry, Kemi, I lost that bit there.
I said I've added the speaker, but it's just taking some time.
So I think we're connecting to audio now. I think we're experiencing some difficulties connecting.
Hi, it's Martin Davis.
Hi, Martin. Thank you for joining the committee this evening. You'll have 3 minutes to address the committee. My colleague Julie from Democratic Services will have a timer that will appear on screen, and it will count down from 2 minutes 30. At that point, I'll then remind you that you've got another 30 seconds to address the committee, and your time will start now.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to have this conversation. Firstly, my main objections are in relation to Plot 1 and the neighbouring property in 9 Wesley Road. And just to be factual about some of these situations there, the house has not been sold as yet. So my mother does live there, and she intends to live there until if she's successful selling a house. So that is the current state of affairs. The main areas of concern are the amount of development, overshadowing, overdominance, the 45-degree code, the garage design and parking, buildability, health and safety, and noise during the construction period. The proposed 2 dwellings have a combined footprint of 348 metres squared, which is a 122% increase over the current existing footprint. The current dwelling is 157 metres squared. Then the actual internal floor area of the 2 proposed dwellings is an astonishing 822 metres squared versus the current dwelling of 248 metres squared. So this is really a real massive increase in the footprint and the internal floor area, which will lead to a cramped and overdeveloped plot, which will impact the street scene, as the council has mentioned. The other point I would like to stress is in relation to overshadowing, overdominance and the 45-degree code. The planning officer's report says it's not really impinging on the 45-degree code, but it actually is. It's really non-compliant. The proposed scheme doesn't comply with the 45-degree code and will restrict natural daylight into neighbouring properties and their gardens. The ground floor of Plot 1 extends 9 metres further than the current dwelling. It's taller than the 1.8 metre fence noted on the plans. The report has mentioned that it refers to a garage at 9 Wesley Road, and that will it's suggested that will block off and obscure some of the 9 metres beyond the current dwelling. I've actually worked it out. It might obscure about 0.5 of a metre to 1 metre of the extended ground floor. The total length of that ground floor, by the way, is 18.8 metres long. In addition to the rear of the property, as one of the councillors mentioned, the garage is right on the boundary of 9 Wesley Road, and it's basically going to go along the whole length of the property of 9 Wesley Road and potentially cause a lot of issues with access during the construction of Plot 1. So I think the combination of the ground floor length and the proximity of the garage and its rear passageway does impact the light and access to that driveway to 9 Wesley Road. Second point is about the garage design and parking. The garage design and rear passage seem to be poorly designed, and the garage space...
Mr. Davies, your time is up, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Thank you for addressing the committee this evening. We do have another speaker that wishes to address us, and that is Tom Brown. So I'd like to invite Tom Brown to address the committee.
Can't find Tom Brown at the moment. Maybe we'll just call the next person.
So Alan James. Alan James, thank you for joining the committee this evening. You'll have 3 minutes to address the committee. On the screen from my colleague Julian, Democratic Services, is the timing, and it will count down from 2 minutes 30. And at that point, I'll then remind you that you have 30 seconds left to address the committee. Your time will start now.
Hello?
Alan James, thank you for joining the committee this evening. You'll have 3 minutes to address the committee. On the screen from my colleague Julian, Democratic Services, is the timing, and it will count down from 2 minutes 30. And at that point, I'll then remind you that you have 30 seconds left to address the committee. Your time will start now.
Hello?
Alan, if you want to continue, if you're listening to another recording, if you can put that on mute. Joining the committee this evening, you'll have 3 minutes to address the committee. On the screen. We'll pause for 30 seconds.
I've brought in Sarah James as well, so maybe she could speak.
Sarah, can you hear me okay?
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So you'll have 3 minutes to address the committee. Your time will start from my colleague Julian, Democratic Services, will have a timer on her phone, down from 2 minutes 30, and at that point I'll then remind you that you have another 30 seconds left to address the committee.
Okay. Is that starting now, yeah?
Okay.
Hello, can you hear us?
You've got two members of the public on at the same time.
My name's Alan. We're husband and wife. So
Your time will start from my colleague Julian, Democratic Services, will have a timer on her phone. 30. Alan James and Sarah James want to remind you that you have another 30 seconds left to address the committee.
okay. Is that starting now, yeah?
Okay. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear us?
Mr. Chairman,
obviously,
Mr. Chairman, Alan obviously is listening to the YouTube as well.
We're just going to pause it just for a second. Then we'll turn any recording that you're listening to, you're hearing the same recording of this meeting back. So any recording that you're listening to, if you could put on mute or turn off while you're in this Zoom call.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I suggest that we ask one of the member of the public to leave the room for the moment and only have one in, because they both are hearing the same message and they both want to speak at the same time. I could hear Sarah Cooper very clearly. I couldn't hear Alan.
So Alan's microphone is on mute at the moment. Sarah's is currently available. Sarah, can you hear me okay?
Sarah and Alan sent one request together, Mr. Chairman, so they're both using the same device. Yeah, they can both speak. They're both Alan and Sarah James. Thank you. Sarah,
Yes.
could you please close the YouTube so that you can hear us when we're speaking to you? Have you done that?
Yeah, we have done that. So I'm
Okay.
sitting in the room with my husband. We're using one device.
Yes.
We can hear multiple people talking. We haven't had the opportunity to speak.
Okay, now we're going to start and the timer will be shown on the screen by my colleague Julie. So you've got 3 minutes each. Okay, thank you.
Okay. My name's Alan James. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak firstly. Our concerns lie with the dormer window on the second floor facing the rear garden on both properties, which will overlook our property and our garden extensively, which will essentially impinge on our privacy. The angle of the window will allow the occupants in residence to view our garden and our house, which we feel is intrusive. We wish to request the window is at the same angle as the roof to avoid us being overlooked in the rear garden of our property, and also neighbouring properties as well, so it's not just ours. It does not state in the plans what the glass that's actually being put in place is made of, or what type of glass it is. If the glass was going to be obscured, this would prevent us being overlooked and be less intrusive. We did have some other concerns as well in regard to the actual planning of the basements. The actual information that was shared on the internet only showed one property with a basement, or one plan of a property with a basement. I do feel, and I did address this in our letter of concerns, which we put in where we could make comment. That's what it stated on the Basildon website. It didn't actually address that there was 2 basements being built. There was almost like an assumption that that was taking place. We obviously have been shown drawings today which show that there's 2 basements. However, at the point of plan, that was not issued, and I'm concerned that that didn't take place, just on the basis of planning and making neighbours aware. If I was particularly neighbouring properties, it wasn't obvious that that was happening at both properties. And I'm not referring to the drawings that were shown today, I'm referring to the ones which were accessible on the internet at the point of application. I don't wish to say anything else. I can't hear him. 1 second, I can't hear you because we're on mute.
No, that was me. Thank you, Alex, for addressing the committee. I'd now like to invite Sarah to address the committee, who will also have 3 minutes, and your time will start.
That was, well, her husband and wife, that was our joint comments. Thank you very much.
So there's no further comments from either of you
Correct.
this evening. Thank you both for addressing the committee. Can we check if Tom Brown is joining the meeting?
Yeah.
Hello, it's Alan Brown. Actually, I'm speaking on behalf of my father.
Thank you, Alan. If you would like to, you'll have 3 minutes to address the committee, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Just like to thank the committee, certainly Mr. Fellows, for taking the time to drive up Wesley Road to see the properties. I would like to point out that on the new revised drawings that were issued at the end of July, don't really address all the issues that were raised by the objections in the first instance. And I would like to point out that obviously Mr. Gill has indicated that the properties up Wesley Road are quite spacious, as in his words. And you're actually seen on the demise line of the property boundaries that the 11 metres 865 on one property and 11 metres 505 millimetres on the other property. Actually, the buildings that are both identical are 10 metres 200 millimetres wide, which gives a gap of 1700 millimetres between the 2 properties that are being built and 1351 millimetres to the adjoining property of number 17, which is my father's. The development, as Martin has rightly said earlier, is vastly over what the developments are in Wesley Road. Yes, there has been developments dividing properties in Wesley Road, but not to this substantiality. The CGI image shows the tree in my father's property, which is nowhere near that size. And what it doesn't show is how close that property is to my father's property. I'd like to also point out that the 45-degree line has been compromised, and the overall impact of the bulk of the mass of the properties adjoining each property to it is quite substantial, and more so with the fall of the road down Wesley Road, which is quite significant. There's no dimensional sizes indicated on the heights of the properties, although Mr. Gill does state it's 8.4 metres high. Like to know where you measured that from, Mr. Gill, really, but because it isn't clear on the demise line of Wesley Road following the fall of the road. I don't think with that size property there's sufficient parking, and there's a number of vehicles that always park in Wesley Road anyway, because there isn't.
I don't know how they've taken that.
Sorry?
Sorry, continue. You have 30 seconds left.
So, you know, we would like to take this all into consideration. To summarise in one respect, we're not over-objecting to a submission of planning, but due to the size of it, it's significantly more than any other property in that road. So, yes, there can be planning, but not on that scale. It's just too big and too overcroaching to number 9 and number 17, let alone the impact that it has on the street scene. So, there's relatively other issues that haven't been raised, but we haven't got time. But thank you for listening.
Thank you for addressing the committee this evening. And I'd like to thank all members of the public for either writing in or addressing us directly this evening. Just before I open out to other members, just want to pick up on a few points that members of the public have raised, and just ask Mr. Gill, in relation to the 45-degree window or the rear view window, is there any additional comments that you wish us to make in light of what members of the public have said, and whether there can be any conditions placed around fenestration of the windows?
I believe the dormer at the rear elevation. I think is that you're talking about, or the rear elevator, the rear dormer is
I think it's the rear dormer. It's the rear dormer, Dave.
Yeah, that's we feel that's say 29 metres away from the neighbouring property, and that's quite a good distance away. We've allowed schemes much closer than that, and felt that was doesn't result in significant overlooking. So there will be some overlooking, but it's of a good distance where we would normally say that it's acceptable. We normally request obscure glazing.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. And the other comments that members raised around in relation to the noise and disturbance of the building property and the basement, those are all measured by building control. Could you confirm that?
Yeah, and so because I did two elements to that. The construction of the building and the basement would be dealt with by building control, and if there's any issues with noise and disturbance, that in terms of the actual noise itself, that would be an environmental health issue rather than a planning issue. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. I now have Councillor Rimmer.
Sorry, I was too bothered with lowering my hand again. I forgot to unmute. I agree with the residents about the CGI. I felt the CGI was a bit misleading in terms of how big this tree is and how much it's obscuring the neighbouring property. But the officers have actually demonstrated to me the distance between the property, and I'm going on that evidence. Looking at it, I would say we've seen similar plots before where we've said 3 or 4 properties on them would be ridiculous, but 2 properties would be satisfactory. I am minded to say that there are plots at about half the size with 1 property on them. So it does look like it fits in with the street scene. And actually the height isn't of the first property is much the same as the property it's replacing. It's only the second property that seems to actually give extra bulk in terms of height. So I'm minded to say that on balance, I think this is acceptable.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Councillor Allen.
Yes, this 45-degree line that one of the residents spoke of, one of the objectors spoke of, is clearly not shown on the ground level on the plot plans, and I think that's a devious way of showing that, of omitting it, so that the 45-degree line, the proposed dwellings do actually impose on that 45-degree lines at ground level. They've shown them at first floor level, and you can see clearly that the 45 degree at first floor level is acceptable, but it's not really acceptable at the ground level.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I don't see any other councillors wishing to indicate, so I see Councillor Dadds, and I'll hand over to Councillor Dadds once I've summarised my own position that this, and I think it relates to the question that Councillor Brown asked in the technical questions for clarification, that this meets our standards. It's the distance between the property, the rear windows and the properties behind it. There's a sizable distance between the two. We have approved other similar schemes of a similar size and scale. So on balance, this does meet our standards. I do thank the officers for working with the applicant to address many of the issues that have been raised. And I will support this application this evening. Councillor Dadds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too are satisfied if the officers tell us that the standards are met and the back-to-back distances are satisfied. I do, however, just want clarification. 2 points I need just to quickly, before I make a decision, is I'd like confirmation that the 45 degree angle from habitable rooms on the ground floor are not breached, so that we have got satisfied there is the 45 degree angle from an habitable room on the ground floor, and that I just want to get clarified. And then could I just have the officer put the plan back up of the street scene with the different plots that Councillor Brown referred to originally? I'd like to have a quick look at that again, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Councillor Dadds. Mr. Gill.
Okay, I'll try and get the plan up. As you know, there's been a few issues. Right, let's see.
Just while you do that, if there are any other councillors that wish to speak on this item, please indicate now. Thank you, Councillor Fellows. I'll come to you once we've answered these questions.
Obviously, Mr. Chairman, depending on the answer, I might want to comment, but this I need to answer. That's all right.
Where did it come?
That's fine, Councillor Dadds.
It's disappeared again. Having problems. Let's go back there for that. No, it disappeared. I don't know where it's got to.
It's hidden behind the tree.
Yeah. Share screen. It's not there. Where has it come? Don't know where it's gone. I can see it on my view, but not yours. Let's try that again. Can you see that? No. 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 Alright. Aha! Hey, I found it. Sorry about this. Right. Back to the start. Right, that's the location plan.
Thank you. And can you just clarify the point that I raised about the 45 degrees?
In terms of 45 degrees, you say we normally assess that the impact on neighbours of the first floor element. So that's the bulkier part of the development. We do allow ground floor projections beyond the 45 degree because they would have lesser impact. In terms of the property on this side, there is, say, different ground level changes. So this will actually be lower than number 17. So the impact will be lessened. The fence itself will probably screen most of that. And this side, as this side here, as I mentioned, the building or the report, the extension would project beyond the garage area there. Yes, there will be some impact, but it is a single story element, and it's not uncommon to have a single story element projecting beyond the rear of a house, 2-story house. So yes, yeah. So the main issue with the 45 degrees is the 2-story elements of the buildings rather than the single story.
Can I just clarify for you, Mr. Chairman, because I know it might be yet again a technical question, but it's not clear for me. Officer, I thought the 45-degree rule was in relation to habitable rooms, whether that is on the ground floor and the first floor in our planning policy. So if I'm wrong, please tell me I'm wrong. If I'm not wrong, can you tell me whether this breaches that rule?
Well, no, the ground floor rooms of the neighbouring property are the habitable rooms we're looking at, and
Yes.
it's the impact of the two-storey element on those rooms, and the 45-degree guideline is met.
And does it breach it?
No, I would say it's met.
Okay, well that's fine. I'm happy to accept your professional opinion that it's met, but you're saying that it may not be met on the ground floor, but on the first floor.
The ground floor elements do project beyond the 45-degree taken from low windows, but the impact of the ground floor element is lesser than the two-storey element of the house itself. So we've kept those shallower, so that ensures that in terms of dominance, outlook, loss of light, it's minimal.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy with that answer, and my opinion is that I would be supportive of the scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Dodds. Councillor Fellows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if one of the officers could just clarify something for me. With regarding the other plots in that road that may have been divided in two, has that set a precedent? So it has this application being set in two, because it has been already established, then that's not relevant in this application.
Councillor Fellows, I think Councillor Brown dealt with that point very clearly, actually, in her comments. Basically, this is based on the plot itself. So actually how wide the plot is and actually how deep the plot is. So it's actually not about a precedent set between what goes on, it's actually how big the piece of land is.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, there are no further members that wish to address the committee on this particular item, so we'll go to the vote on the recommendation on page 29 that planning application number 20/00683/4 be granted conditional planning permission subject to the conditions on page 39 to 42. I will be voting in favour. Councillor Fellows.
Yes, in favour.
Councillor Allen.
In favour.
Councillor Rimmer.
In favour.
Councillor Kettle.
In favour.
Councillor Brown.
In favour.
Councillor Dadds.
In favour.
So that is 7 in favour. That is, that is 7 in favour. That is unanimous, and that is carried. So we'll now proceed on to agenda item number 6, planning application number 20/00387/4, Jessamine Hofield Avenue in Whitford, which is on pages 45 to 62 of your agenda. Councillor Rimmer.
Do we have a short break?
I will allow a 5-minute break, so at 8:57 we will come back together. During the break, if I could just ask all councillors and officers to turn their microphones and cameras onto mute or off. Councillor Brown, can I just confirm you're with us?
Yes.
Perfect.
I'm here.
Councillor Dance?
He's there, you can see him.
I can now. Okay, we will now proceed on to agenda item number 6, planning application number 20/00387/4 at Jessamine Hofield Avenue in Wickford, pages 45 to 62 of your agenda. And I'll hand over to Mr. Spears.
Okay, if you will bear with me, we have the same screen sharing that I'm going to try and launch. Okay, is that all visible to everyone?
Yes, for me.
Yes. I
Okay.
can see that.
That's brilliant. Okay, right, we're nearly there. Okay, well the application site is located in a former plotland area in the Greenbelt to the north side of the arterial road at Wickford. The area comprises private roads and includes development of established dwellings and both authorised and unauthorised mobile homes, together with quite a number of vacant plots. The application site itself originally comprised a detached bungalow towards the northern end. You probably, I don't know if it shows up for you there, but towards the north, and then a complex of commercial kennel buildings. I think it was Greyhound Kennels originally, to the southern end of the site. There's also an area of land towards the southern boundary of the site that has been hard surfaced and used for siting of 4 mobile homes without planning permission. But as this is a subject of separate enforcement action, it's not a material consideration in reviewing the current planning application. The site, as I said, is located within the Greenbelt, and relevant planning policy guidance in respect to the Greenbelt places restrictions on new development to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open. However, there are exceptions to the general presumption against the construction of new buildings, which include the replacement of existing buildings in the same use, provided they're not materially larger, and partial or complete redevelopment of previously developed land. So obviously this site effectively is a combination of the two, and obviously they shouldn't have a greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt than the original development. In this instance, this photo was taken a year or so back, and I understand that actually quite a lot of the bits of building on here have actually since been demolished. Now, the site was the subject, and I think some members were probably on the committee at that time, subject of a previous planning application for its redevelopment for 2 detached bungalows in 2018. Replacing both the existing bungalow and the kennels. This was refused planning permission by members who determined that whilst the proposed replacement of the existing bungalow with a new dwelling was considered to accord with policy guidance, the second bungalow, replacing the kennels, had a greater impact upon Greenbelt openness than the existing buildings. However, permission was subsequently granted on appeal to the planning inspectorate, and this consent is an important consideration in assessing the current scheme. Just quickly show you a few photographs of the original buildings as they were. You've obviously got a couple of photos at the bottom of the original bungalow with its sort of various extensions and alterations, and then at the top, the sort of the kennels, kennel buildings as they were at the same time as the aerial photograph. I think pretty much that those would have been taken. The current application proposes the construction of 3 detached bungalows of similar design, each with their own accesses and parking for 2 vehicles. The 3-bedroom bungalows are of generally traditional design and material finishes, with hipped roofs and ridge heights of 5.5 metres each, and each one has a floor area of 149 square metres. It's probably useful just to do a comparison with the earlier scheme. The original bungalow at the site and the kennels totaled 657 square metres floor area, together obviously with a range of concrete hard standings. And previously, permitted in 2019 on appeal was a development of 2 detached bungalows, each of 266 square metres, so quite large bungalows with a total floor area of 532 square metres. So the proposals, as you look at it in terms of footprint, are 210 square metres less than the floor area of the original development and 85 square metres less than the earlier residential scheme for the site. Now, floor area obviously is an important consideration in looking at impact on Greenbelt, but obviously it only shows it in one dimension, and we do also need to review the impact of Greenbelt on openness, looking at the massing of the building. So what I've put together here is a comparison of the 2 schemes. So obviously the top one is the scheme for the 2 bungalows on the site, and then below it you'll see the scheme for the 3 bungalows. So lesser floor area on the current proposed scheme. It is 3 units, and obviously that does mean there'll be a certain degree of increase in sort of residential activity within the site. But the buildings themselves, as you can see there, I think they're about 100 millimeters less in ridge height than the proposals that were granted permission. They have a sort of a slightly different profile. They're hipped, whereas these are sort of gable ended. But in terms of the actual sort of presence on the site, there's not a lot to choose between them. I mean, the gaps between the properties are in different places because you've got 3 buildings rather than 2, but actually as a whole, their coverage of the site is 36 meters of the width with 12 meters in gaps effectively, or space between the units, which is pretty much identical to the two building scheme, as these were both wider units. So I think what we would say here is that the impact on the Greenbelt is not considered to be any greater than the previously approved scheme. And I think we feel that, having regard to the inspector's views in relation to the original scheme against the original development on the site, the proposed scheme does accord with Greenbelt policy. So we've assessed it against all the relevant planning policy guidelines. The proposals are not considered to represent inappropriate development within the Greenbelt. Albeit that the proposals to build 3 bungalows at the site, their total floor area is less than both the original development and previously granted planning permission for 2 bungalows, and would have no greater impact on openness in terms of built mass. The design of the buildings is satisfactory, with adequate parking within each site and no material harm to the amenities of neighbouring occupiers would result. It's therefore recommended that planning permission is granted for the proposals, subject to the conditions which are summarised in your report. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Spears. We're now going to technical questions for clarification. I'll invite Councillor Rimmer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got some real concerns here in respect of openness of the Greenbelt. I appreciate what has been decided in terms of the appeal decision, but these gaps and the street scene that we're looking at, I mean, what are the size of those gaps, please? Because to me, it looks like we are creating a built environment and just dropping it in front of the Greenbelt. Whereas even with the 2 houses, which I had a problem with in terms of openness of Greenbelt, you could at least make an argument to say that it was a reasonable replacement for what was there before. That's what the planning inspector has said. This feels like it's even more built up, even less open. And so, yes, please, what are the gaps between these properties?
Yeah, the spaces between the properties, so as you're going from north to south, so from the adjacent residential property at the northern end, there's a 1 metre gap to the first bungalow, 3.4 metres then between the first and second bungalow, 4.6 metres between the second and third bungalow, and then 3.1 metres, sorry, I can't read my writing there, 3.1 metres between the third bungalow and the southern boundary of the site. So if you do a comparison, the approved scheme had 1.5 to the northern boundary, there was a wider central gap of 8.8 metres, but that was really to allow the construction of the access road to the rear, because obviously in that scheme, the parking was in a sort of a hard surface parking area at the rear of the site, and then 1.9 metres to the southern boundary of the site. So it is really the amount of sort of space compared to the amount of built form is actually very, very similar between the two.
Yeah, but so apologies, but I mean, for the amounts we're talking about, the biggest gap you mentioned, was that 3 metres, sorry, or 3.4 metres?
4.6.
4.6.
Yeah.
So, okay. And so there's that comparison in terms of the visual amenity of the green belt and its openness with an 8-metre gap. I appreciate what you're saying about access road, but in terms of visual amenity of being able to view the green belt and its openness to others, that's quite an impact, isn't it?
I mean, I think the overall impact of the buildings on the site, given their altered design, you've got a sort of hipped roof form. Obviously, if you've got a hipped roof as opposed to a gable-ended roof, obviously you've got more view through the site than you had on the original scheme, which, as I say, was gable-ended. The spaces are, well, they're 4 separate spaces as opposed to 3 spaces between them, and you have got that wide one in the centre. I suppose under the original scheme, though, as you look down that gap, what you'd really be looking towards is a parking space and parked cars. So it wouldn't necessarily be to sort of to an open area of greenbelt at the back. It would be to a sort of a car parking area, whereas the whole of the area to the rear of the site would now be residential gardens. So in a way, it would be more open in that sense. And I think the designs themselves are superior to the original designs, and probably a little less bulky themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dadds.
Officer, can you just perhaps amplify what the inspector said about openness and visual impact on the scheme that you're saying in a semi-rural location was acceptable, whether it was officer's recommendation or member's decision was overturned? And how does that relate to here? Because now we've got you're talking about the build mass, but visual impact. But what's the current density as opposed to the density that was approved as well? So I want to have an understanding why the inspector allowed the 2, and was he or she taking into account like the kennels, the hard standing, and the general weighing up the scheme on the openness and the harm to the green belt? And I'm a bit concerned here about we're increasing the density to 3 dwellings, that openness and density. So I'm a bit concerned about the increase.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the first point, I mean, there's 2 elements to this, because obviously there's 2 parts of the planning policy which the proposals, I suppose, are sort of matched up against. You've got the replacement of the existing dwelling. So obviously, as the inspector was looking at it, he looked at that in relation to the one of the 2 dwellings as being a replacement for that original dwelling. He felt that at 35 or 40 square metres larger than the existing building, that accorded with the National Planning Policy Framework in not being materially larger than the original dwelling. And I think actually members themselves, I think, didn't really have a problem with that being replaced. In terms of the other part of the site, that was the area that members, I think, had most concern. They felt that the existing kennel buildings were set back on the site. They obviously, clearly being kennels, weren't at all. They're probably perhaps 3 metres in height, and the building that was being proposed was significantly greater in height than that. I think the inspector accepted that it was a larger building in terms of height and set further forward on the site, but I think he felt that what it did allow was a lot more landscaping, and would allow sort of, I think he called it a if I can see where he says it here somewhere. Humans were not plot 2. Yep, floor area existing 266. Previous development. Where are we? Apologies, I'm trying to read through.
Yeah, take your time.
That's okay. Thank you. Mongoloid. Yeah, I think he seems to suggest that the bungalow would be more compact than the range of buildings on the site as they are. I suppose the kennels spreading around in that sort of C shape that you saw on the aerial photograph. So you'd have it was a more compact form of built development. There would be the compact form of development would offset the increase in height and give it a more rural appearance. I suppose in that sense he's also referring to the fact that the hard standings would be removed from the site. Yep, native hedge along the front boundary in lieu of the existing front boundary wall, gate, and the hard standing. So I think he was taking all of the elements in relation to that part of the site.
He's weighing it up.
Together.
He's weighing up the harm
I think it is
currently existing to allowing additional dwelling to offset one the other. So my next question is, what's the density now?
I mean, that's really yeah. I mean, well, I suppose it's 50% more because you had 2 before, and there are now 3 dwellings being proposed. But I don't think it just density is not necessarily the measure here. It's the mass of buildings, and it's the sort of the footprint of buildings before and after that are usually the elements that we look at when we're looking at Greenbelt. So it isn't just the numbers of dwelling units. You've got to look at the sort of the massing of the buildings. As I said, you're quite right. It is a weighing up exercise as to whether you feel that the 3 units have a greater impact on openness than the 2 buildings before. Our view is, and obviously I've tried to show you that with the sort of comparison images, is that because of their more compact form than the building that was previously granted on that part of the site, because of the changes to the roof shape, the narrower form of the buildings, that their impact is no greater than the 2 buildings would have been previously.
But so that I can just clarify, Mr. Chairman, but what the planning inspector did previously with the 2 dwellings, accepting the increase in height and the additional dwelling, is offsetting the harm currently there with the other dwellings, i.e. the kennels, the hard stand. So it was a weighing up exercise. Now you're saying, well, that was allowed then using those measures, but now we look at it again and say, well, actually, where's the impact now on the density? Because density surely has an impact in a rural area on the Greenbelt. So that is a much more consideration, more we should be considering that, shouldn't we, about the density in the rural location?
I mean, density, I suppose, in terms of the fact that you would have 3 households living on the site, and you would have additional activity from 3 houses as opposed to 2 houses on the site. But obviously, I mean, density is nothing if you don't also consider the actual size of the residential units in this case that you're looking at. You're talking here about 2 units of 149 square meters floor area. Previously, it was 1 unit of 200 and well, 2 units. Sorry, it was 3 units of 149 square meters, and you're obviously talking about 2 units of 266 square meters. Similar heights. So it's in terms of the mass of building, I don't think there's actually significant difference between the 2. I apologies if I'm being a little obtuse in my answers, but I don't think that the numbers of units per se is necessarily the main consideration here. It's whether the development as a whole has a greater impact on openness than either the original development of the site or the development that has extant planning consent.
Thank you. Councillor Dance, do you have any further technical questions?
Can I just seek a point of clarification? I understand what the officer's saying, and obviously it's clear in my mind. Are you saying then, if they could get 4 dwellings on it with the same build and mass, doesn't matter what that is not a consideration because it's within what has been previously granted for 2 dwellings? Because I don't understand. I'm surely about openness, 2 as opposed to 3 dwellings makes a big difference.
Well, there may be other elements that will come into play at that point, because then you'll be talking about whether it's an urban or rural area. You'll be talking about the width of the plots. So therefore, there'll be this argument about, well, is that in character in the area? So there's other more general visual amenity issues that you take into account. I think I would think it would be difficult to see how you could get 4 units on there, you know, that would be of a practical size. I think given the sort of the limitations in terms of the buildings and the fact that you want something that doesn't have a greater impact. The element that I suppose would be greater also with 4 units would be actually the general activity, residential paraphernalia associated with 4 units. There has to come a point where, yes, I mean, the number of units probably would come to a point where it has a greater impact on openness in itself due to the other activities associated with more units. But I mean, that's sort of all ifs and buts. I mean, the application before us is for these three units, which
I'm just
we don't feel has
establishing
a
the
greater
principle.
impact.
I'm just understanding
Yeah, I mean,
what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean,
okay. Well, I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman. I'll make comments when we're invited.
Thank you, Councillor Dadson. Mr. Spears, the previous application that we've already had and the response back from the inspector, could you confirm that, first of all, that's a material consideration in our decision, and secondly, that the application in front of us meets our standards in terms of minimum space standards and plot sizes and so on?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as it's a very recent appeal and was made under current national planning policy framework, the current planning policy framework, then yes, it is an important material consideration in looking at this application. In terms of the dwellings themselves, yeah, I mean, they're 3-bedroom houses of reasonable size with very large garden areas, and I think if you compare them to the plot next door at Sunny Dean, the size of the plot and that is very much comparable.
Thank
it's
you.
Against the policy, isn't it, Greenbelt?
Sorry, Councillor Dads. Councillor Rimmer has.
Mr. Chairman, you are. Yeah, Mr. Chairman asked, and you asked the officer, is it against our policy or according with our policy? And the officer didn't answer that point. And I just want a clarification. It's against our policy on Greenbelt, isn't it?
No. We consider that on balance, when you look at them, it isn't against the policy on Greenbelt.
Okay.
Actually, I think, I think we get to decide that based on the evidence in front of us. But we'll come to that. I respect your opinion. Just on this, though, you did mention an important point, and that's why I'm coming back and asking another question for clarification. And it was to do with the appeal decision. And you were talking about the compactness of it and how spread out the previous kennels were, despite the height. And a mitigating factor was that there'll be 2 properties that would be more compact and less spread out. Is it not reasonable to suggest that with these 3 properties that they're going to be more spread out than the 2 properties that we were talking about before? And it lessens that mitigation that the inspector was actually looking at. I asked this genuinely as a clarification to see what you say to that side of things and make sure I haven't misunderstood.
Yeah, he refers to the...
Yeah, sorry, can I just, if you refer to paragraph 10 of the decision notice, Stuart sets it out in that.
So yeah, in conclusion, the proposal would encompass a replacement dwelling that would not be materially larger than the one it is intended to replace, and plot 2 would be the redevelopment of previously developed land that would enhance a sense of openness. Therefore, the proposal would not be an appropriate development in the Greenbelt. It follows that it is unnecessary to consider whether there are very special circumstances to justify the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Rimmer, do you have any further points for clarification before we go into the main debate?
So it's just carrying on with this. Sorry, I mean, I appreciate that may have been a conclusion, and I apologise to the head of planning, but you were about to give another answer in terms of, and I don't think it was specifically that. It was to do with the body of the appeal decision, there are other things said in the appeal decision that I brought up in the technical session yesterday. But if we could, what were you about to say in respect of the body of the appeal decision, where it was raised in respect of the spreading out of the previous dog kennels versus the two compact properties, and whether, and this is the question was actually to do with whether having 3 properties there would actually be more spread out and actually reduce that mitigating factor.
Well, I think you touched on that. Is there any more that you wish to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've covered most of it. I mean, the other thing I would say is obviously I've already gone through the amount of space between the properties and that. So to my mind, it doesn't have a greater impact on openness. I mean, that's really the view we've taken. It is a matter of opinion. It's a matter of weighing up the evidence, and obviously I hope the comparison ones have helped councillors to form a view on it. Sorry,
apologies. Is it more spread out than the 2 properties or not? I've just in your opinion?
No, because you've actually got the same space around the properties that you had before. The distances from the northern and southern boundaries of the 3 properties is similar. Rather than having the 8 metres in the middle, you've got that split between the existing properties. So I think the spread, well, the plot's the same width. You've just got 3 units on the plot instead of 2. So they're smaller units.
And
thank you. I'll invite Councillor, do you have any further points of technical clarification?
Yes, sorry, I alluded to this one. Apologies, Chair. So in paragraph 6 of the appeal decision, it talks about if instead policy BAS GB3 had actually been used in referral to one of the replacement buildings. And obviously I raised this as a technical briefing. I think it might just help members if you could cover that point again, really, was that interaction between using the national planning policy framework versus policy BAS GB3 in respect of reasons for refusal.
Yeah, this one goes back obviously to the previous application. We have a sort of long-standing policy going back to 1998 in the previous local plan, now the Save Policies local plan document. Now this sets out our sort of how we look at replacement dwellings in the Greenbelt, and what we would calculate it on is the basis of the original dwelling plus 35 square metres. The National Planning Policy Framework takes a slightly different view on that, and that looks at the existing dwelling and that any enlargement of it when it's replaced, actually doesn't say dwelling, actually says any building in the same use when it's talking about replacements, it should be not materially larger. So I mean, in a way, I mean it's more flexible, I think it's fair to say, in terms of what it permits. We looked at the previous application on the basis of the National Planning Policy Framework, basically because the policy BAS GB3 predates the National Planning Policy Framework and is effectively therefore not up to date with current national guidance. I mean, I think the inspector at the end of paragraph 6 of the decision actually does point that out. It says accordingly, policy BAS GB3 is not consistent with the framework, and therefore any conflict with it is of limited weight. So I mean, I think that's a view we'd taken when we looked at the application, and really when we look at applications generally, we do have to balance up whether we are using the most up-to-date policy when considered against national guidance, and if that's newer and that's at variance with it, obviously we have to give that significantly more weight and give the policies themselves a lot less weight than we would have done a few years ago.
Thank you. So I mean, he does seem to give weight to the fact that we didn't give it as a reason, that we didn't actually utilize it before making that last statement in that paragraph, from my understanding. But to what with these 3 properties that we're talking about, do they comply with the BAS GB3 standards of infill?
I mean, if we take the plot 1 at the northern end of the site as a replacement for the original bungalow, well, it's actually a lot less, obviously, because the bungalow at the northern end of the site is 200 and, well, is it the one that was allowed to be replaced there is 266. The existing one, I think, is about 230 square meters, or was until it was demolished. Obviously, the replacement dwelling is only 149, so it's significantly less than the original building that it replaces. It's probably more akin to what the original building on that plot was before it was extended over the years. The replacement on the previously developed land, obviously, is slightly different, but obviously there you've got again, a 266 square meter single bungalow that was permitted on appeal. That's now being replaced with 2 smaller bungalows, which I think the total area of those would come to 300, about 300, just under 300 square meters. So a little bit more than the 266, but not substantially more, and still less than the floor area of the original kennel buildings, and certainly in combination when you add all 3 together of the original buildings on the site and the scale of development plus all the hard standings, significantly less than that.
Okay, thank you. We'll now go into the main debate. Mr. Spears, can you just confirm that we haven't received any written responses? We don't have anyone that wishes to speak on this item.
No,
do we have any
we've had no comments from any third parties.
Thank you. So we'll now go into the main debate. Councillor Dadds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm concerned about the application insofar as the effect on the Greenbelt. I accept what the officer has said is that that we have to take or have regard to the current permission or consent, but obviously each application is judged on its own merits. And as I understand it, the planning inspector, when he was determining the previous application, was weighing up the hard stand, the kennels, the other buildings, and generally weighing up, in effect, the harm that has been created about and allowing a replacement plus additional dwelling, and weighing up all those factors came to the view, contrary to that of the council and its councillors, to give planning permission because the openness, the landscaping, that in effect taking away the harm of the kennels would in effect overall benefit the Greenbelt. And I can understand possibly that rationale, even though the council didn't share that same view. However, this application on its own merits, whilst the building mass may be analogous or similar, it is nevertheless an increase in the dwellings. The density increases. There are now 3 dwellings, which wasn't before the inspector. And I can't but help that must have an impact on that openness or the visual amenity, the way it looks in the semi-rural location, 2 as opposed to 3. And we do have our own policy that says that we are to protect the Greenbelt, and we have particular regard to it. So I'm at the moment, it says the council will continue to protect the openness of the land designed within the Greenbelt. But I'm concerned, I don't know about other councillors, you may all take a different view, but I'm concerned about going from 2 dwellings to 3. So it's not only now a replacement, it's a replacement plus 2. And I think that's going one step too far. And if it's accepted that you just look at mass and out external buildings, we could and you would have situations where that people are calculating all their land up and then putting multiple houses on one site, or taking down 1 and replacing it with 3 and saying, well, the overall mass is no different. But then officers, I'm sure, would be saying, well, you have to consider the impact of 2 or 3 dwellings on the openness of a semi-rural location. So I'm concerned here. I'm not satisfied that that with this application that there will be harm to the greenbelt and the openness by having 3 dwellings, not 2.
Thank you, Councillor Dadds. Councillor Rimmer.
I think, to be clear, I mean, if we're looking at what was there before, a very ramshackle kennels and a cottage, and what's shown to us in the images, you'd have to say, well, obviously, what's the future looks better. But the test is about the openness of the green belt, and there's a principle at stake here. And essentially, what we've got is a third property being added to this planning application. And from my mind, where we've had a gap of 8 meters before in terms of visual amenity of being able to view the openness of the green belt, I agree that's reasonably limited, and that was probably why we decided against it in the first place. But it's a lot better than the 4.6 meter gap that's proposed, and the actual there being 3 properties rather than 2 properties. And I'm of the view that density is important in this, but how many people are using those properties and the facilities, and as you'd said in respect of other units, if there were extra units, the residential paraphernalia that would actually come with them, the cars that would come with them, the strain on the the actual extra density of people has not been designed for in these sorts of rural communities. The local plan, there are neighbourhood plans that actually are going to take all of this into account. If we have plots like this in the green belt, where we just allow for 3 or multiple properties to actually be added to them and still say that this is openness to the green belt, we've seemed to have shredded up the policy altogether, as far as I'm concerned. Now, I have to respect what the inspector has actually said, but I do actually think there are lessons for us as a committee and lessons for officers, perhaps, based on what he's actually said and in terms of the reasons for a refusal. I might be wrong because I haven't got the professional expertise of officers. But that's my inclination to believe that. And I have to say that in terms of the extra property being added, in terms of the lack of openness that I think this development involves, in terms of the increased density and increased usage of our green belt by what will be 1 extra household of people, I feel that this really has to be rejected and refused as a planning application. Otherwise, it's a mockery of our green belt policy, both nationally and locally.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I mean, I fully sympathise to an extent with what Councillor Rinner and Councillor Dadds are saying, but unfortunately, under the NPPF, they're wrong. The NPPF, as the planning inspector showed last time when this was rejected by councillors rather than officers and taken to appeal, that under the NPPF now, the things that were considered by the inspector are the things that under planning legislation have to be considered. Is it replacement dwelling? Yes. Is it appropriate redevelopment of a previously developed site? Yes. In the fact that now the hardcore, the amount of openness and all of those things is actually less than what was there originally. And unfortunately, whether we like that or not, that is present planning legislation. Central government determine what is and is not planning legislation. We do not. But as a planning committee, it is imperative that we follow that legislation and that we make sound decisions on material evidence. And the previous application that went before the inspector and was overturned at appeal is material evidence. And as our officers have explained to us, the NPPF trumps our local guidelines, because that's what they are, guidelines and not legislation. And clearly, this site now is significantly smaller than what was previously there. And I feel that if, as a committee, if we are mindful to refuse this, it will be very difficult to come up with grounds for that. And all that will happen is that this will go again before an inspector, which will overturn our decision because our decision is not in line with present central government legislation. Thank you. So I will be supporting this application. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Allen.
Yes, the inspector approved the development of the 2 bungalows amounting to over 500 square metres of floor area. And these 3 bungalows have much the same, slightly less, probably around the 532 adding up the 3 of them. So really we've got the same development that the inspector appealed. And so for me, reducing it to numbers, as I've just recited, the numbers tell me that this is an acceptable development in developing previously developed land.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I don't have any further speakers, so I'll set out my own position that this application...
I indicated to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Dodds. I will come to you afterwards. This came before committee in December 2018, and I supported it then, and I supported the officer's recommendation. The committee at the time went against that recommendation, and it went before the inspector. The inspector agreed with the officer recommendation and allowed the development to take place. We have a very similar scheme coming forward that actually reduces the amount of land that the proposal is going to be built on. So exactly as Councillor Allen has just said, it's very similar. In fact, it's less of a development. And as the officer said earlier on, that if we're talking about openness, this is an increase of openness within the Greenbelt. So I'm not prepared to take to oppose a development that the inspector has already made a decision on. Granted, this is an extra property, but I'm not prepared to oppose a similar scheme that the inspector has already made a decision on. That is a material factor that we need to take into consideration, and the possible costs that could come to this authority as a result. I think that's an important consideration that we must take into the equation. Councillor Dodds.
Well, we shouldn't be intimidated by a cost application. I don't believe a cost application was awarded last time. We are entitled to our opinion, and there are many examples where the members of this authority's decision has gone against the officer's recommendation and has been upheld by the planning inspectorate. So officers don't always get it right. Members do get it right most of the time. And the officer may shake his head, but I can give many examples where decisions have been made by members against officers' advice and has been upheld by the planning inspectorate. And I noticed on the enclosure 2 that the council did not submit an appeal statement in relation to the appeal before the inspector. So in other words, the member's decision was not defended. It was just left for it to fall. So, but I will say this, I've listened to Councillor Brown and I respect her opinion and view. I don't share it because I do believe a planning inspector would have a different view, and I certainly take a different view, that 3 dwellings as opposed to 2 does have a difference on the impact of openness and the way it looks and feels. And that's what we do as members, to say how would we feel, how do we see that, even though it's just not merely maths about it's a similar build mass, but it's not. These are 3 dwellings as opposed to 2 in a semi-rural location, and with that increase of activity, cars, and all the stuff that goes with homes. So I think we shouldn't place too much. We must place weight. I'm placing weight on the previous decision, but I'm looking at this application at its own merits. It is 3 dwellings and not just a 1 and a replacement. It's 3, and I believe it will have an impact and it should be refused. And that's my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer, and then we'll go to the vote on the recommendation.
I was just going to say that to Councillor Allen's points and Councillor Brown's point as well, I think this is a different application. I have actually weighed that up myself because obviously I don't want us to go against what the planning inspectorate has said on appeal. I think he's actually given some, he's been very balanced in how he's come to a decision. He's actually made some actually positive noises about our decision-making process and why we might have come to our decision. It wasn't as black and white as presented by the chair on this occasion. I'm sure he didn't mean it to be presented that way. In terms of what Councillor Allen was saying in terms of footprint, I think that's without a doubt true. But what we're talking about here is the density as well of these properties and the extra people that it would be bringing to the green belt. If we imagine this being a residential area, which it is not, it's green belt, and we were looking at the street scene, this would be something material to consider as well. And actually you can see that actually there is what is around it. This would be totally out of character and out of place to have these free properties there. And I think that that has to be something that we should take into consideration. If it's something that we take into consideration in Langdon Hills or in Pitsea. And the openness of the green belt is also about that visual amenity as well. I mean, yes, we might be stretching it a bit in the sense of where we're going from in terms of we're not at point A to point B here. We've got extant planning permission on 2 properties. But I do actually see that lack of that gap, which is significant. 8 meters is 4 people, you know, lying down head to toe. So, and slightly longer than that. They're not all 2 meters tall. So I think that has to be considered about what's being lost there in terms of that visual amenity and that impact on what would be creating a street scene in a residential area.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Councillor Dadds, did you wish to come back in?
No, I don't. Sorry, I'll put the hand down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I have no further speakers, so we will go to the recommendation on page 45, planning application number 20/00387/4 be granted conditional planning permission, subject to the conditions on page 54 of your agenda. I'll be voting in favour. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, in favour.
Councillor Brown.
In favour.
Councillor Dadds.
Against.
Councillor Rimmer.
Against.
Councillor Fellows.
Abstain.
Councillor Kettle.
Fine.
Sorry, Councillor Kettle, was that abstain?
Yes.
So with 3 votes in favour, 2 abstentions and 2 against, that has passed and been approved this evening. So we will now go to agenda item number 7, planning appeal and enforcement update, which is on page 63-76 of your agenda. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, on this point, I'm going to withdraw from the meeting. Will you excuse me, as I've declared an interest, and I think it's best that I withdraw on this update.
Thank you, Councillor Dadds. It is just for noting.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
But nevertheless, I'll leave the meeting at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further members that wish to ask questions, if you use the hand up tool? Okay, I see no members wishing to ask questions. Councillor Rimmer.
So how many sort of costs and charges decisions have we had against us?
The document provides you with an ongoing update of where we get to. We can provide that information next meeting.
Yes, please. It was just obviously it had been alluded to tonight, so it would be good to see how many.
The last 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely, but also to see the decisions against us without costs versus the decisions against us with costs would be great.
Yeah, I don't think costs are an issue that we should be looking at. I think it's actually just the decision making, because I think, as Councillor Dadds did say, or was it you? I've always been very wary about threatening costs with members. It's actually about the decisions that we make, and it's actually about what's that seen as. We are usually very careful about taking risks about costs, and we tend to actually manage to work around those challenges.
No, that sounds eminently sensible to me.
Okay.
Any further members to wish to ask questions? Councillor Brown.
I think that, following on from what Head of Planning Christine has just said, that it's about looking at these decisions and using that in order to make better decisions in the future, and to ensure that this committee as a whole fully understands the legislation and is following it, making good, sound decisions that are consistent. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further members to speak tonight, so thank you all for your attendance. I would wish you all a safe journey home, but you're already there. So I will see you all at the next meeting in 2 weeks' time.
You safe journey home, Jack.
Thank you.